I don't know. Yes.
We're on. Good evening. Welcome to the town of Hanover. Hanover.
Hey.
Hey, guys, come on.
Your
Select
chair
board
is
meeting.
speaking.
September 26, 2022. Here tonight to have some fun and do good work for the town. And as always, the first order of business is public comment. Hearing none. I'm opening a public hearing to accept unanticipated funds in the amount of $240,739.71 from the state of New Hampshire Supplemental Block Grant SB 401. At this time, the balance of the funds are being anticipated to be used for the LED streetlight conversion and then to repair the drainage pipe adjacent to the Ledyard Bridge. Peter, you want to talk to this? Introduce yourself.
Good evening, Peter Kulbacki, Director of Public Works. This really started out to be a lighting question. We originally submitted a earmark 2 years ago, and it was funded. But then we found out in May that was only 50% funded. So this was at the same time. We weren't told the funding levels until like late August, whatever percentage was, after the state then had given us this additional funding from highway. So sometimes not knowing is good. So this is money that's found money that we don't have any other projects planned in highway, and the limitations, you can't spend the money on things that you've already budgeted. So you can't offset existing costs. So we can't say, well, we'll offset our paving budget, we'll offset our wages. You have to spend it on something you hadn't planned spending it on. So that's a natural project. The total cost originally was in the 270,000. It's probably closer to 350 now. All of the Department of Energy, it actually has given us up to 270,000. So we could use all the money if we needed to. We won't need it, but you could use the full amount if necessary. So, but the idea is to bid it and contract with somebody that meets all the Department of Energy requirements and change all our LEDs, all our Liberty-owned streetlights to LED that we would control. So that's how the money would be used, and the balance that would be left would be looked at. We have a culvert, a large culvert, about the size of, not quite as wide as this table, about 5.5, 6 feet in diameter, right on the downhill side of the Ledyard Bridge. That's the last section has settled because the footings at the end or the head wall had fallen apart because it wasn't built properly by the state. So this would be an opportunity to fix that. I think there'll be some extra money left that we'll have to come back and decide some other project that would be related to highways, public good. So we'll be probably coming back at a later date once we have the project figured out for lighting as well as a project for the bridge.
Okay. So Peter, tonight this public hearing is to accept the money,
Yes,
and you described to us how we plan to use the money.
correct.
Okay. And this changing of the lighting, and it's been a long-term project. We've been at this for 3 years.
It's been about almost 20 years. It was one of the first projects that Sustainable Hanover tried to do. We found out the hard way that you can't turn people's lights off.
So we're getting there.
So we're getting there.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in terms of changing the lights out, is there communications that are gonna go out to the community? So beyond CATV?
Yes, there'll be, once we have, there's a process I still have to go through. And that's the second public hearing, we'll talk about that.
Oh, okay.
But there is a process.
Okay.
Yes.
This is a public hearing. Any public comment on this item? I moved it. Was there a second?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
I
Close that public hearing. I open another public hearing to accept unanticipated funds from Grant DE-EE0010144 in the amount of $271,000, which is anticipated to be used to convert utility-owned streetlights for town-owned controlled LED lights.
Very well
open
put.
that public hearing, and Peter, would you like to, any more to be said on that?
About the process, I can probably go into more detail. So there's a number of steps that we have to go through. We were talking about, we're having fun in the back talking about the process of accepting federal money. So there's quite a few documents that have to be signed and negotiated. I've had a couple of meetings with DOE, have another one tomorrow. And part of the step is to verify that you actually have your share of that money. And this I can go to them and say, here's our share. We can match our value of that project, which right now is, I'm completing the paperwork to say 400,000, even though it's not going to be that, just so if we have supply chain issues, and this is going to take 6 or 7 months to get through the process, just because of each step we have to go through. The first step is to get them to approve the funds, then we have to bid the funds. And then once we have an award, we have to also negotiate with Liberty on what the value of residual value of the existing streetlights are. So that's another step that, and hopefully we can come to agreement on that. That could take a month, 2 months, 3 months. Hopefully it's only a month. We have some preliminary numbers for them. We've been talking to them for several years now. So hopefully they haven't changed their mind on what the values are, although the delay in changing is actually the value's gone down. That's one plus side to this. The longer we wait, the less it costs us. So after that happens, I've talked to several vendors already, looking at different lighting technology. It'll take 3 to 4 months to actually change lights out. But the process will be an inventory of what we have. We think we have lights. Some of the lights we actually, every time we look at them, we find out, well, we don't have a light there, but we've been charged for it. So they'll have an actual map. And I did submit a copy of a map of what we think we have. And it's really difficult based on what they provide us for data. We also went out and inventoried it, but there's lights that have been moved and poles that have been moved. So we don't know if it's exactly 100% correct. But the goal would be to, over a few months, 3 months roughly, is to systematically change the lights out. The lights would be LED that'd be under 300 Kelvin temperature, which means they're going to be on the softer side. If you look at the lights that are on North Park Street in Annetton Village, those are 400 They're pretty harsh. Well, the new technology does have the ability to drop the wattage and get the colors down to an area that we want to be in, a different color range. It has the ability to actually communicate. Each light can communicate cellularly, so we can actually turn each light on or off, reduce the wattage at night at certain times. So if there's a neighborhood, we want to just drop the intensity by, say, 75%, so there's still some light, but it's not in people's windows. We can do that. We have some streets that we may want it brighter. We can have it brighter. You can change the lights at different times of the year, different times of day. I mean, night, certainly not day. But you can also actually know what's out. The only way we know it's out is somebody calls us, or we notice them that we're out at night. So it's typically, we get a phone call, the light's out, and it may take several weeks before we get a response from Liberty, and then it would take another month before they actually change the light bulb. We would be contracting maintenance of this. These lights are, because these LEDs, they have a lifespan of 30 years roughly. So we should not have, unless there's some damage to them, something hits them, power surge, which is another question. One thing it does also provide us is actually metering. Right now, we do not know how much energy each light uses. It's based on what Liberty has as a demonstration light, where they have a meter on some place in the state. So we will actually know how much energy is being used by them, because we get billed for what we use. Once we change the lights, our lighting bill will go from about $80,000 to probably $8,000. So it's a huge chunk of money we won't have to pay anymore. We'll have to probably figure out what's the likely annual maintenance cost. Could be something more than that, but that's roughly our Liberty bill will be about $8,000, somewhere in that range. So because we will now own the lights, we're not paying for them. The lights, we maintain the lights, we're not paying that piece. Only thing we're paying is distribution and transmission costs. So that's just the piece that
We're doing it for sustainability reasons. We're also anticipating saving.
There'll be substantial savings.
$70,000
Yeah.
a year for a long time.
Right, and it'll be saving roughly 60% of our electrical consumption by changing from high pressure sodium to LED. So it's that alone is a good reason to.
Any other questions for? This is a public hearing. Any questions from the public? All right.
This is Kari Asmus of Aetna, and I'm wearing in part a finance committee hat on because as a member of that body, I'm often interested in additional funds that come in and how they might be, best expended. So thank you for, all that information. I just want to point out that these funds were not actually unanticipated. I think Peter can confirm that they were in the budget for DPW under outside projects. So town meeting gave authority to both accept and to expend these funds. So I would just request that the minutes reflect that, this is not an additional amount that would allow spending above what was already adopted. So that we understand that if we someday look back at the minutes and try to figure out what happened. I'd also then, just as a resident of rural Hanover, I have to say this discussion of the streetlights reminds me of a process probably about 20 years ago that we had the guiding growth in rural Hanover. And in one of these forums, the question was asked, how many people would like to keep the streetlights? One person raised his hand and everybody sort of looked at me and said, oh, I kind of like them. But, most people were very concerned about maintaining the night sky and so on. So to the extent that we can achieve that goal more readily now, I just, would like to speak at least on those residents of 20 years who opined that was the consensus at the time.
Thank you. I'm going to amend my motion to eliminate the word unanticipated. And with the board's permission, we'll do the same thing to the previous motion. Any other public input?
Those weren't the same people that showed up to the hearing when we talked about turning lights out.
I remember that.
There was quite a vocal group of people who did not want to have any light turned off.
So I did, a little thing that you mentioned in the previous public hearing that I am now just recalling is that if the state did not do a thorough job at installing the Ledyard Bridge culvert, and since the state is going to be redoing the bridge next year, could we have the state
I have
work on
tried,
that?
I've
Okay.
tried. They were very adamant that it's our drainage, it's our problem.
Okay.
So we'll fix the drainage, and if it washes out the bridge, it's their problem.
Okay,
That's what I told them.
okay, it just seems.
We found a method, actually, Christine has come up with another method that would actually be substantially less than what we had for quotes. Original quotes are $300,000. We've been struggling to figure out how to do this, and we've had a quote that's substantially less than that, in the 15 or 20,000 range, so it's well within.
And it's gonna work.
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
So it
thanks,
might-
sorry, that
Yeah.
should have been asked.
Which my
Previous-
amended.
I asked that several times, and I tried to get them, and I apparently did not get to the right person.
Glad you tried, thank you.
Yes.
Was my amended motion seconded? I don't remember.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
We also need to make sure that Alex has authorization to sign any of the loan documents or the agreements of grant agreements.
Okay, so the motion includes authorizing Alex to sign whatever he needs to sign to make it happen. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? It's approved.
Thank you.
And I
Well done.
And I close it, well done. I close the public hearing.
Thank you.
The next order of business is I move the approval of the appointment of Melissa Martin, Assistant Town Clerk, Tax Collector, as the Town of Hanover Municipal Agent. We hear a second.
I'll second that.
Alex, you want to just brief us on this quickly?
Sure. So this is a new employee downstairs, and this is a step that we have to go through to appoint the person as the municipal agent. And so there's some paperwork for us to sign tonight to do that, and that will allow the person to process vital records, motor vehicles, and that sort of thing. We're very happy to have Melissa on board, and yeah.
Questions? Those in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Approved. Appointments. I appoint Susan Edwards to the Sustainable Hanover Committee and Bertie Waugh to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. They're both renewals. Reappointments, I guess I should say. Do I hear a second to that?
So second?
Thank you, Nancy. Any questions? These are long-term.
I know both of them.
Yeah, they were long, pardon?
I said both of them have been on the board for their respective committees for very, very, very long
These are
time.
very senior, long-term volunteers.
And I'm impressed they want to be reappointed.
I'm pleased that they want to be reappointed.
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
I,
Thank you, Susan and Bernie. Employee recognition. I have a proclamation to read.
fun.
Drum roll. This is a proclamation recognizing Mark Roper for 16 years of service and achievements working for the Hanover Department of Public Works. Whereas Mark Rogers was hired in the Hanover Department of Public Works August 28th, 2006. And whereas to improve the quality of water, Mark developed and administered the Hanover Fats, Oils and Grease Program and the Industrial Pretreatment Program for the town, which has been recognized by the state of New Hampshire and which has been published in a number of journals. Whereas Mark is committed to the success of these programs and has done a tremendous job with outreach to the residents and businesses of the program. Whereas under Mark's program leadership, the town was recognized by the EPA for the quote outstanding pretreatment program for non-required communities award. And whereas Mark was assisted in the development of the sewer ordinance, was instrumental in the development of the wastewater intermunicipal agreement with the town of Lebanon, and drafted a draft stormwater ordinance. Busy guy. Whereas Mark was a key individual in the monitoring and elimination of illicit dumping into storm drains by various commercial kitchen exhaust hood cleaners. And whereas Mark has taken great pride in his work and has worked diligently to ensure the quality of the town's wastewater influent. Now, therefore, I, Peter Christie, on behalf of the Select Board, community members, and employees of the town of Hanover, do hereby issue the proclamation to Mark Roper in recognition of his many years of achievements, and we extend our gratitude and appreciation to Mark for many years of exemplary service to the town. Thank you.
Come
Mark, would you like to,
on up.
you want to say something? or-
I don't. Well, I didn't say.
You don't have to say anything.
You don't have
We
to.
can give you your technical proclamation. No.
I want to
I know
say a
I'm
few
gonna
words about that.
call to get
Yeah.
my budget
Yeah.
report, Mark. What am I gonna do this year?
Peter,
Sure, I just want to go over, just when I first arrived here, our wastewater facility was somewhat antiquated. We had all kinds of problems with plugging sewers, spills, and we were at capacity. And it was something that we didn't know how we were going to be able to achieve any water quality. We were violating our discharge permits. And we had a lot of upgrades required to our facility, but the one issue we didn't have is ability to control what went down the drain. And it was something that with Mark's hire, we were able to do that. Systematically go through and find out what the problems were and then correct them fairly, working with businesses, not heavy-handedly. It's been a very cooperative agreement amongst not just Hanover businesses, but there's a number of businesses in Lebanon that discharge to Hanover, working closely with Lebanon as well. So we've got to the point now where we don't have these issues, and it's a point where we have if we have an issue, it's like, whoa, we'll report it because it doesn't happen very often. It's happened, I think it's been several years since we've had any spills, and they were because somebody had a plug line, and it's something they put down their own line. So we've changed the way we've had to maintain our lines because of diligent work that Mark has done. And it's something that it happens without anybody knowing it's happening. And that's something that's really something I want to thank Mark for his good work. He set a great program up. it's gonna be something easier for someone to continue than what he's already done today. So I just want to thank Mark.
Sure.
Thanks,
And I
Mark.
guess, I would like to say.
Mark, come on up here. Introduce yourself.
I didn't say that much. I would like to say that, you know, I did come to the town with some experience. And I want to thank Peter for really just giving me the reins and, you know, letting me take on some of these projects and some of these ideas, you know, some of them we just had an idea. And we went with it. And it worked. And one thing, Christina too, I wish that I, you know, had much more time to spend working with her. She's really great.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Alex, might we have a proclamation itself?
One more thing.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much. So-
Thank you, Mark. Okay. Next item is a continued discussion regarding the proposed rental housing ordinance. Rob, you want to come forward? Or not? No, you probably don't want to come forward, actually. But please come forward. Just in case we have questions. Okay, we've been at this for for a long time. We've had work sessions, we've had public hearings on this. I don't know, I can't remember. We've had lots of public discussion. We're in line for a public hearing next meeting, which would be the formal adoption if we choose to adopt it.
Sure.
I emailed Rob this morning, one suggestion. I thought the changes that were made to the applicability were actually took us in the wrong direction. And if you want to go there, if you look at applicability, the rental housing ordinance of Hanover shall apply to the following hereafter referred to as unit. The one that was changed, I think now should read non-owner, no hyphens, non-owner occupied dwellings, including single family, two-family, multifamily, and condominiums. I think that's about a simple way. So we don't repeat words. We make it clear that the beginning of the sentence, non-occupied dwellings, modifies everything else. So my suggestion to Rob was to include that simplified language. So it would read non-owner occupied dwellings, including single family, two-family, multifamily, and condominiums. And I was educated today that two-family is different than multifamily based upon
State law.
State law.
something out there.
State statutes, right?
So that's why two-family cannot be captured under multifamily. I tried, but I was correct.
And I made those changes and sent them to Alex later today. I also addressed the issue that you raised about fines.
And I guess I would also change this, not this, I would also change the second one. I'd get rid of the hyphen and owner occupied, just owner, non-hyphen occupied dwellings.
I don't know if that's right.
Huh?
I don't know if that's right.
Oh, it was wrong, tell me.
I mean, it's a modifier of dwelling is an owner occupied hyphenated.
I don't think it should be, maybe if my grammar is wrong, correct me. Rob's staying out of this. I had my editor wife.
We
look at
did
it.
invite, you know, like an English professor from Dartmouth.
I'm happy, I just,
I will,
couldn't find why you have a hyphen.
I will have my my go-to grammarian review it,
Okay,
and Vicky will guide us on.
Yes.
all right. Whether we need hyphens or not.
Yes.
All right, that's good. Okay, other than that, I had no other changes or words with it. Did anyone have anything more to add? Bill,
It's not on language change, but just understand the concept. Under enforcement,
Yes.
the says the town of Hanover may seek an administrative inspection warrant or other order from a court of competent jurisdiction for the purpose of making such entry. In other words, when you're refused entry,
Yes.
just on what's that take? I mean, is that something you go in tomorrow and get it, or is it like you got to get in the queue and a month later you finally get a hearing?
Could be a day, 24 hours, or a week generally.
Okay, so it's not too long, but could slow you down
Yeah.
if there's a serious problem. But again, if it's a serious problem,
We
I
would,
assume it becomes,
we would escalate it in a way that, you know,
thank you.
the other thing we brought up at the last meeting, and I don't know where you all have decided on it, but we have no non-compliance fee or penalty in this. So my question is, if people don't comply, what are our options? What should we do? What can we do? And do we need a non-compliance provision?
So there was some language in there. I think you updated that language. We did send it to our attorney. There was a reference to a penalty clause that refers to a state statute.
Okay.
And Rob, I think you updated that language in here.
I did.
Right? Yeah.
So G now reads,
What
on
page you on?
page 6, I believe, page 6, bottom of page G.
6. Yes,
Any person, firm, or corporation who violates any provision of this chapter for which another penalty is not specifically provided shall, upon conviction, be subject to a fine not exceeding $1,000 per RSA 31:39 small d and RSA 676:17.
okay, that language is not in the one I received. It will be in the new one.
I think that was just going with the one you just sent
That
around.
was the one I just sent to you
Okay.
this afternoon.
Okay,
So
so there
we'll
is.
circulate that.
Okay, so there is a penalty
Yes,
clause now in it. Great,
Yes.
good.
Or we'll post that up to the website too.
Yeah. Good. Any other?
No.
Ideas, questions, additions, whatever, by the board. If not, we will be all reconvened
Come a long
for a
way.
public hearing next time.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to go, so that's great. All right.
So Carly Asmus of Etna, I'm here again. While we're going through the most recent draft, which I hadn't had a chance to look at our last meeting because it came out just before the meeting. I am looking at the section under authority. And page one. So starting at sort of the top there, authority, it mentions 48A1, and following. I just think that it would be more clear if it stated that it was 1 through 13. Because 14 and 15 won't apply once the ordinance is adopted. I guess we've already adopted an ordinance under 48A. So it'd be clearer if it was 1 through 13. And of course, anything that I say that's legal advice, I know you will check with your own lawyer, but I
I'm
will.
sorry, I'm not sure where you are.
Okay, so authority.
On
So
page one.
on
Page
page
one.
1, section 3, Roman numeral 3.
Authority.
Yeah. And then the other parts,
So what is wrong
It
with what?
cites 48-A:1 and then Latin, and what she's saying is
it'd be
-13, so it goes just 1 through 13, not
Okay.
through 1 to 15.
yeah,
Okay, so you'd suggest that we
instead of using
read
Latin,
1-13.
right, and then a person can go to the statute and read it and know exactly what you're referring to. It's just, it's a bit cleaner. Also over the weekend, I had emailed Alex saying that, a closer reading of 48A mentions that this ordinance is supposed to be adopted by town meeting. And I said, well, then how is the select board doing it? And he said, well, that our attorneys have said, no, it's okay. And I did go back and I found that Walter Mitchell at one point explained and is quoted on the record as saying that it depends where you look in the statutes. In some places, it says that the select board can do it, and in other places, it says that it should be town meeting. And he said that it wasn't that clear, but, he thought that the select board could do it. So since it's not clear where your authority comes, and in this case, it's not coming from 48A, I think it's coming from the town charter. Under authority, then if we are trying to explain to people where this is coming from, I would add where the authority is coming for the select board to adopt this versus town meeting, because if you read 48A, you think it's supposed to be town meeting. And I just would hate in the future for somebody else to bother our town manager saying, well, shouldn't it have been adopted by town meeting? Of course, if you still wanted to take this to town meeting and get the thumbs up from everybody, you could still do that. I would also say that this is something that I brought up in June and that I just still have not understood it. Because, you know, going through 48A, you do not see a place, I mean, it keeps referring to dwellings. And the definition for dwelling is any dwelling throughout the municipality. And this is not applying to any dwellings across the municipality. It's referring to rentals. So if there is some place that our attorney is seeing in 48A that is specifically referring to rentals, or if there is another statute or another ordinance or someplace else that allows this to pertain specifically to rentals, I think, you know, it would just be, again, that's why this section is here, to let people know where the authority is coming from. And then the final thing is, and I hadn't brought up this before because I was just reading about it over the weekend, but the state requires that, what is it called? Restricted rentals have to file with the town who their agent is for service. And it's a $100 fine if they don't, but the town can, to just get to the chase though. If the state specifically is reserving for themselves the right for restricted properties to register with the town, my question would be, where do we as the town have the authority to require registration from non-restricted properties? And that would be basically single family houses. And I can see that probably it sounds like I'm back to speaking Latin or something. But again, I'm just suggesting if you go to the attorney and that we have this section under authority be more robust so that everybody can understand, you know, as we go forward, where the origins of authority was. It could save everybody some headaches down the road. Since you mentioned applicability for, I have to say, when I read this non-owner occupied dwellings, you know, and I know it says including, but it just seems so obvious, and it almost seems weird that it doesn't say apartment buildings. I mean, except for it's kind of clear that those are non-owner occupied, but you could have one of them in the building, you know, be owner occupied. So I just thought that it was odd that it didn't mention apartment buildings when that's really what a lot of the rentals are. Going down to the next section, definitions, responsible party. This is something that I brought up in June, that when you're a condominium owner, there's actually not one primary contact. You know, a condominium association is governed by bylaws that we have to follow by statute. And then as an owner, I'm required by statute to follow those bylaws. And so we have a responsible party that is responsible for the sewage, the drainage, the roof, you know, this, that, the other thing, everything, all the common areas. And I, as an owner of a unit, you know, I have control of what's inside the drywall, you know, and the floor and the ceiling. So there's not one primary contact. It really depends. And then the association, well, they do have the right to come in and say that I have a pipe that was frozen, now is leaking. They have a right to come and fix, you know, to immediately do something. But, you know, if you're talking about the countertops, they can't. So I just don't know if there's a way to, I don't know if you just want to routinely, I mean, I don't know if you want to change the definition and then routinely have responsible party / owner to take care of that dichotomy. I mean, there are a number of condominium associations in town, and this language just doesn't work in that context. And I'll, you know, I can answer questions if anybody has any later about that, but it just doesn't reflect the division of responsibilities for associations. Other ordinances, the second line there, the second sentence, all properties shall comply with applicable state. And now, are we talking about all properties, or are we talking about all rental properties? And if you look at the definition above, you know, it says that it either means implied by the context in this ordinance or the ordinarily accepted meaning, but in that case, it's two different ones. So do you mean all rental properties, which is I think what you do? And if so, I would add the word rental. I could also say, just for clarity, on that second to the last line that starts with RSA 48A and RSA 150A, 155A, which includes but is not limited to compliance with the state fire code. You know, if you go to 155A and look for the fire code, then it refers you to RSA 153:1. So again, if we could just, instead of having all that long phrase, which includes but is not limited to compliance with the state fire code, and then you can't actually find it, if we could just say RSA 153. So it'd be RSA 48A, RSA 155A, which is the building code, and RSA 153, which is the fire code. And it, you know, so again, it's just if you are trying to orientate people to where they can find the information, that is just a sort of more direct. Well, I'm on to page 2, certificates of compliance, paragraph B, first line. Following the issuance of an interim COC and receipt of a renewal application, or is it or? One or the other, you're following the issuance of an interim COC or, you know, after the receipt, but you're probably not going to have, at least I wasn't thinking of a circumstance where you would have, you know, I think that these things apply in either of those instances, but I'll let you think about it. But I'm just flagging it as something that, as somebody who's read this quite a few times, I'm still confused by. Let's see. And then I think that this section grew out of the work session that we had, where some people said that they wanted to know what ordinances we were working off of. But I really thought that they were saying that they wanted the exact codes on the inspection list. But just in terms of this list, we see the International Building Code, which is for new constructions that are not single family to, you know, in townhouses. But I was wondering, are we really applying that to all the existing buildings, or are we applying the International Existing Building Code and the International Residential Code, the IEBC and the IRC? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe
Carl, you're gonna put all these down, I'm sure.
I just want to, I don't know how quickly you want to turn this around.
We're gonna be dealing with this next 2 weeks. from
I
now.
know, but I think that you have to have it ideally sort of what you are going to be.
I trust the department will take all these into consideration. We'll work with our attorneys to see which ones need to be incorporated.
Okay. Well, I guess I would really actually like an answer. Are we going to be using the IBC, or are we using the IEBC and the IRC?
Do we know the answer to that question?
You don't have it. My preference would be to research and this.
Okay, all right, I can send that one. I guess I am also thinking it'd be good to have an answer to page 3, J, on request of owners, prospective purchasers, etc., or other legitimate interests, the department will inspect a unit. Do we know who we are thinking of when we say others with a legitimate interest?
Which number?
The neighbor.
Yeah, a neighbor.
Jay.
Yeah, I'm assuming a tenant, would a parent of a tenant, I'm just thinking that but I don't know what you're really thinking about that. And I don't know if the staff knows.
What's the question?
Who would you deem to have a legitimate interest? And Jay?
I think that would be at the inspector can make that decision as to who
Okay.
has the legitimate
It,
interest.
so I have heard that, staff has to pay, or spends a certain amount of time with parents of renters. And they say generally that there's, nothing that they can do. And this is like, who could request an inspection?
I'd be happy to try to answer the question to the best of my ability. When we're dealing with individuals 18 or older, and they're the leasee. Their parent doesn't have standing. So if I get a complaint from a parent who is not a signature on the lease, I request that they ask the tenant to file. I need the tenant to let me in if I'm going to do an inspection on their behalf. The conversations are often about the quality of the place, not necessarily the code related issues. And that a parent is not happy with the quality of the space that your child is. I make it clear what the codes are and what the standards are, and if the tenant, the leasee, would like us to come and inspect, they should reach out. So with regards to legitimate interest, it could be fire marshal's office, Department of Health, fire department, a range of entities that would have concern or a need to have access.
Or the tenant themselves?
Or the tenants, always the tenants.
Going to page 5, skipping ahead, responsibilities of responsible parties and occupants. That first A, all units must be registered with the department and have a valid and current COC or temporary COC as required of this rental housing code in order to be occupied. Or the transfer option too. If I'm not mistaken. Is that right? And then I know also from the workshop, that, in addition, a lot of the DE, et cetera, keeps talking about the responsible party. That sort of doesn't work in the context of the condominium. But there was one of these that I'm not seeing now, but the point was that if there is a hearing, I think that it just says that the responsible party will be notified of the hearing, but one of the owners who attended the workshops, and no, the owners have to be. And it's not jumping out at me. But that was, here it is. I think it is in G, on page 4. And that last line, due notice of hearing having first been given to the department and to the responsible party, and the owner said, no, I, the owner, need to receive that.
Well, the definition of responsible party is either the owner or an individual authorized to act on behalf of the owner.
In some cases, there can be 2 different people. I think that the owner who was there, has somebody, a responsible person, but in that case, she wanted not only for the hired person to get the notice, and you could say, yeah, then she's responsible, to get it from them. But she really felt that if there's a hearing, that she herself wanted to be notified in addition to the person that she hires to take care of those things. And I'm just passing that along. I don't have that problem that I have. It's somebody that I can delegate it to. So I think you would be contacting me, although again, I'm still curious. If there's a violation that has to do, with one of the common areas, the recycling shed, something that I have no control over. Is the violation on me or is it on the association? I don't.
So if we're parse this out, the unit owner is renting the unit.
Yes,
This ordinance applies to the unit owner and the rental of the unit. We're dealing with broader violations they're generally not going to be related necessarily to just this unit and its rental.
Yeah.
It'll be a violation of our solid waste ordinance or something else. If it's brought to our attention, we'll address it in the proper manner like we currently do.
Well, that's good to know, because again, reading this and attending all these meetings, it still really wasn't clear to me how that was, how that would work out, but it did occur to me that, a lot of the issues, the town does already have the ability to inspect for any number of reasons and so on. I am sorry if I am for you, but it's not like I am stopping anybody else from speaking. I guess I just wanted, well, I can try asking staff, but I know staff has a lot on their plate already. And so I think, Peter, you may remember the first time you said, write this down to staff. I was like, well, they're busy. I'm busy.
I just want to make sure we consider all of the questions you raised and consider them by next week. And to the extent that this is not perfect, it's what the expression, it's not perfect, it's not yet the end. So as we adopt this ordinance, if there are issues that come up that are not clear, then we'll have to amend the ordinance to clarify whatever is not clear. We're gonna do our best job at the beginning, but we know it's not gonna be perfect. We know it's gonna need changes. We'll adopt as the time goes on.
So a broad question, the things that are on the checklist, just how this is going to work, and since we have our fire chief here, maybe he can also speak to it. The very first thing is about working smoke alarms. But when you look at the life safety code, it divides existing buildings, apartment buildings, into 4 different options. And depending upon which option you're in, where smoke alarms need to be, if they need to be there at all, differ. And the way this is set up currently, it looks like, I see that there's a not applicable column. So is this a situation where, you would go in and you'd see, okay, they have, what is it called? A complete automatic smoke detection system. So that means that they don't actually need this. Or does that really apply across all 4 options? I guess I wonder how granular is this list going to be applied? Broadly or granular?
Questions way above my pay grade.
Broadly,
Chief, do we have any?
Probably,
broadly.
that's what it
We're
says about the
we're
checklist,
gonna
right?
classify the use of each building based on the code. Wood frame, multifamily, age of construction, type of system. We'll make an inspection based on that assessment. We'll then 1 and 2 family are a different category. We'll make an assessment based on that. Homes that are heated, units that are heated with fossil fuel, different standard. This is stuff we deal with daily. And we'll continue to do what we do. There's no perfect solution. The goal of the checklist was to let people know that most of the inspections are driven by code. That's the goal.
And it would be good
I
if,
did jump in here for just a second.
Yeah. Yes.
A document here.
Chief,
Marty, you just need to stand by your mic.
Hi, Martin McMillan, Hanover Fire Chief. So I have a document that was published in 2020. It's from the State Fire Marshal's office when Paul Parisi was the State Fire Marshal, and it speaks to this directly. And it basically spells out each type of dwelling, whether it's rental or not, and gives the appropriate level of fire protection that is needed. I will make copies of this and give these to Rob. I will give one to Kari if she would like one. And there is a provision in here under rental unit, and the definition of that means any rental unit which provides permanent or transient living facilities for one or more persons, which is occupied by a tenant on a rental basis. This term shall include but not limited to hotels, motels, dormitories, apartments, duplex units, rooms rented out of homes, single-family dwellings, so long as they are rented. So it hits every possible rental dwelling or unit, whatever term you want to use, and I will provide that with you. You have that, okay, so he has that.
And just from a process perspective, one of the things, if the ordinance is adopted on October 3rd, one of the things that all of us internally will do from that point going forward is write up the actual sort of administrative regulations that would manage this program. So the ordinance is sort of the top, the RSAs are the top layer, right? And the local ordinance is another layer, and then actual administrative regulations that sort of lay out all of the sort of standard operating procedures that we would use to actually implement the program would be written within the guidance of this ordinance. And so I would expect that at that point, those sorts of details, we'll sit down and we'll kind of work everything out. And the form that's a sample will turn into, the actual form that we would use.
So kind of like the rules.
Yeah.
Ideally, it would be an online digital document.
That is the ideal, yes.
But I created something so people.
So we have something to look at and yes, but it won't, I don't imagine it will be exact,
No.
certainly.
Great. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful, because I mean, that is some of the information that I've been looking for and trying to get an answer to very, for a number of weeks. I do just want to also point out that this is related to this ordinance, but others as well, that there's an RSA that we fall under, that when you refer to a code by reference, so when you adopt a code to by reference, as we are, where we say the IBC or whatever, that you need to have copies of what has been adopted available for public use. And the RSA, 4722 says that there should be 3 copies three copies basically in the planning office and 3 copies with the clerk. And I have to say, when I was trying to read the codes to try to really understand this, my experience was that, okay, well, you can make an appointment and come and read it. And, which I showed up and I did that. And it was like, and it's just like, and if you want any copies, you could take a picture of it with your phone. I don't normally carry a phone. It's like, well, can I take this and get copies? No, it has to be here. So I really would like to suggest that we have additional copies, maybe at the library or, wherever, so that people who have to live by these things actually have a way of reading them. And the fire code in particular is not available readily online. Not the one that we're under, I was sent a link, if you want to sign up. So I just want to make a suggestion that we have the codes available to anybody who's interested, and that whatever form is come up with, that it state which code it's referencing to, because it's really hard to understand where things are coming from if you can't read about them.
So I want to point out that we're not adopting codes. The codes are adopted at the state level.
Yes.
So there's a financial cost to purchasing the code. It's about $1,000 a volume per copy. So I don't read 4722 to imply that we need to have 6 copies of NFPA 101 sitting in town hall. I read that if we adopt any provision that isn't adopted by the state, we need to have those copies available. But I'll seek guidance from council.
Yes, but I would say I don't know, this is so arcane, who has ever looked it up? What I'm saying though, is that what we are currently doing really is not sufficient. If a person shows up and they want to read, several chapters, and they're told that they can take pictures with their phone, and they can't go and get copies, isn't helpful.
We've asked the Howe Library if they would purchase a set and they declined.
There's also the Hanover Library.
I can make the request.
Yeah, and
The Etna Library.
yeah, it's the Hanover Library. Yeah, the Etna Hanover Library. But, yeah, okay, well, thank you.
Any other comments on this ordinance, please?
My name is David Clem. I reside at 6 Ridgeboro in Etna. I'm obviously coming to this issue late in the game. I have not participated in any workshops, but it's unclear to me based on the conversation tonight how one can be, as a member of the public and as a taxpayer, how you can get up to speed on this proposed ordinance if it's scheduled for ordination next week and you're still writing parts of it tonight. So where will I be able to see what you will be voting on a week from now so that I can understand more precisely what's being proposed? That's number one.
So it was posted at the town website and it's available in the planning office in draft form. And the hearing we're talking about scheduling is in 2 weeks.
One,
It's,
Oh, 1 week.
it's
October
one,
3rd.
October 3rd.
It's
Okay,
one
sorry, I
week.
apologize.
so where does one get a copy of the ordinance to be ordained as opposed to what evidently you have different drafts of in front of you now?
So that draft will be posted to the website tomorrow morning. You can go to hanovernh.org/rental housing. So over the last couple months, we've kind of used that as a place to post all the updates about everything. So we had a public workshop a couple of weeks ago on that URL, hanovernh.org/rental housing. You could also email myself or Rob, and we can email you a copy of the latest copy. This one is just a couple hours old. On that rental housing site, there are a couple FAQ documents that compiled the most common questions that we got from members of the public about the ordinance. So those might be good starting points as well, because those might be questions that you might think about that other people have already asked that we've answered. And we also have the video from the public workshop meeting if you'd like to watch that as well. There's a couple other documents and versions of drafts up there so you can see each draft. What we've also done is each new draft that we've done, although I don't think we did this for this one, Rob, maybe we can. I know it's one more thing to do there, but we posted a cover letter that just showed the changes so that you could see, most of these are pretty minor changes. They're not really super substantial. But all of that is at hanovernh.org/rental housing. And if there's any documents there that you need that for some reason you can't access on the website, I'm happy to send them to you
How
as
can
well.
you anticipate having absorbed tonight's input and decided what we're gonna do, what we're not gonna do? When would you see having a final version online?
Well, what I can definitely do, I was gonna post the one that was a couple hours old. We've now made potentially a couple changes to that. So I would say certainly by, Rob, you think by Wednesday, we'll have the final. I've also asked our attorney to send it to someone at the firm who's never seen it. Just, I always think a fresh set of eyes is helpful. And so that might take a day or two as well. So I would think by the end of the day, Wednesday, we can post that there. But also I would just point out that I think all the changes that we're making at this point are very substantive changes to the ordinance. It doesn't change anything about what we're doing at all, unless I've missed something. These are technical changes that some which we should certainly make and some that we may want to consider making. But as far as I'm aware, over the last over this meeting and the past meeting, I don't think we've changed anything significant about the program or the ordinance itself, just clarified maybe in areas.
So
Go ahead, please.
my initial reaction is that I believe we have a town code or ordinance that specifies the window for public hearing, posting documents. We should verify they're not violating.
Yeah, and if so, then we'll push back that. I'll check with our attorney, that if we do have to update a draft with anything, if there has to be a 10-day period, for example, between the last update to any draft and the public hearing.
If it's substantive change, I believe we need to.
That's my understanding too, is that substantive changes, which is not what we've been making, do require that window, but I will ask our attorney and make sure that we do that the right way. I'll let you all know in case that changes the timing at all.
Let me respond that I'm, having spent 50 years in the development business, trying to create a variety of different types of housing and having some success, and having been an elected official, I understand the process. I'm not challenging the process. I just need to understand it. I think I'm perfectly capable of reading an ordinance and asking intelligent questions if there's ambiguity. I'm not a lawyer, don't want to be a lawyer, and not here as a lawyer. I'm here as someone who's a resident of the town of Hanover, who, it's a small place, but there are those who love it, and we want to do something that makes sense. I think this is a well-intentioned ordinance based on what I've read about. But I think it has unintended consequences that the select board should be aware of, and the public should be aware of prior to your vote. If I believe there are existing codes that have been adopted by the town, existing enforcement mechanisms that do precisely this. But for reasons that are not clear to me, there is the approach of yet another new ordinance to try to accomplish this, the reasonable objective of safety in rental housing units. If that's a common good, and I think it is, just as our housing stock here is our common wealth, you certainly couldn't replicate it in today's dollars for what people's existing basis is, then it ought to be funded by the taxpayer and not supported by a specific segment of the population, namely those people who are owners of rental housing, whether it be a two-family house or a multi-family unit or a dorm unit or a fraternity unit. I don't know. I need to read the language precisely. But if this is a common objective to create and monitor and enforce existing codes for safety, then it is a common objective and should be supported by the taxpayer at large, not identifying a subset of the taxpayers to be responsible for, in my opinion. Secondly, I think there needs to be some at least appreciation of the fact that it may be contrary to other policy of the town of Hanover that's equally supported by the majority of residents in town, looking for a diversity in our population so that it's not just a place for the well-to-do, but the people who can afford it. I think this will result in rent increases at a time when rents are already under tremendous pressure. And some of those people we want to maintain in our community who are retired on fixed incomes. It is naive to think that these additional charges will not be passed on to the tenant. We need to understand that if we're going to be part of a policy that results in putting more pressure on rental markets. I don't think a lot of attention has been paid to that. Additionally, I hope it does not create such an administrative burden to those people who don't have management agents or condominium associations or even computers to go online, that it results in a disincentive to promote rental housing. That's the last thing the town of Hanover needs, anything that becomes a disincentive to promote rental housing. I think the select board needs to ask that question on this ordinance. Will it be, could it be a disincentive to encourage rental housing? A third issue is, will it promote people who look at this new administrative burden imposed on them, not equally across the tax base, but just on them? will that create the wrong incentive for them to take advantage of this red hot housing market and sell and move on? I think that could be a destabilizing factor in the local housing dynamic. Just as Dartmouth College offering a $5,000 bounty to students who rent off campus. Those are policy issues that the town ought to be evaluating in the context of proposing any new regulatory environment. We ought to be user-friendly in promoting the creation of more housing, in promoting additional accessory dwelling units and making it easier for people to do that, helping them do that, not making it a morass of ordinance language that is very difficult for the average citizen, even those of us with a Dartmouth degree, to comprehend, especially when it's in conflict with other ordinances in your own website. So I'm not preaching about the details of this particular ordinance. I'm not informed, as I will be by your ordination vote, if I get a copy of what's actually being proposed. And I will put my comments in writing so that you can evaluate it. But at 10,000 feet, there's always a process with meetings and workshops and things that the average person doesn't know anything about. I'm not sure delay is justified at this point. But as an interested and experienced housing developer and observer of civic process, it seems that there's a rush to get this passed next week without a more comprehensive. I'm happy to look at the frequently asked questions and the workshop results. I haven't had the opportunity to do that. I read the newspaper thin as it is every day. I try to follow things, but I don't spend a lot of time on listservs listening to that kind of chatter. And so I'm coming to this late in the day based on an article that was in the Valley News about the ordinance that, from my experience, is well-intentioned, but will have unintended consequences. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on this particular item?
I mean, our goal all along has been to do it right, to the best of our ability, with the concept of amending as, down the road when things aren't perfect. So if it's going to take you guys a couple of days to get the final before the next meeting, which is on Monday, should we have the public meeting on Monday, or should we do it the next meeting? I can give everyone time to take a deep breath, look at things, and then go from there. I just feel, as I sit here, I just feel there's all of a sudden it's a week from tonight with stuff that isn't final. So,
Board, you want to delay the public hearing? When is the next meeting after?
The 20th.
Yeah, I think from our perspective that, 17. That would, no issue from our perspective, 2 more weeks.
it'll give you more time to get the legal review and get everything published without scrambling.
Certainly, and then what we could do on a week from tonight, which is what we sort of intended on doing tonight, which I think is fine, because some of these changes we shouldn't be, making before we get started, although at some point we do have to do it. But then on the 3rd, we can present the final draft. And that's 2 weeks away from the public hearing. So
That works for me.
it's certainly, unless.
But I think it's important to note that this isn't, we have considered the consequences of doing this and not doing this for many years. And in terms of impact on the housing, we have looked at the financial implications, and yes, it may be passed on at the tune of $8 per month for increase in rent per unit. Our units can have up to 3 people in them. So we're talking about $8 a month. And when the going rate for one bedroom is well over $1,000 a month, $8 is a very small percentage to have a safe rental unit. So, I mean, we have considered the financial impact on this rental. And the hope is that we have safer rental properties as a result of implementing this ordinance, so. But I agree, we should have a final draft available to the public.
We probably gave you 10 days notice anyway at this point.
Yeah.
I get
Yeah,
it.
it sounds like if, that what we're doing at this stage is just tweaking the final details. We're not going back and reconsidering of any.
We set, can I make a motion to set the public hearing for? What date is it?
October 17th.
October 17th?
Yep.
And how do we undo the public hearing we set for next week?
Well, we'll just.
Yeah, I mean, we'll discuss it anyway, so we can, I don't think there's any.
Yeah.
Reason we can have two, or not hold it.
So I'm going to delay the public hearing from next week to October
17th.
17th.
For the record, town ordinance 1 requires 7 days to post.
So for
Let's do it.
further discussion on that, already?
It's, I don't want,
No, pardon me?
Further discussion on that. already? Is there a
Yeah.
second on my motion?
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, Chief. We have some input.
Thank you, Martin McMillan, Hanover Fire Chief. I just officially want to support this from a fire safety perspective. I know Rob, Julia, Alex, and the select board have been working on this for multiple years. This probably started briefly, maybe 8 years ago. I've been here a little over 8 years. I noticed a big hole in the lack of inspection when I first got. And started kind of rolling some of this out initially, especially because we've been in some rental properties that just scared the you-know-what out of me. And this has taken a long time. It's not perfect. I absolutely realize it's not perfect. The fire department goes out and does about 1,200 inspections a year in a couple of different occupancies in what I call the super high potential loss of life issues. And this rental housing ordinance is going to fill a huge gap and really put our arms around the whole rental community in the town of Hanover. So I just wanted to officially go on the record and say I fully support it. And Rob, you've done a good job. Poor guy goes on and on. That bad shoulder. I would by the time if I was this, I wouldn't have any hair left. I mean, how many versions? And again, I know it's not perfect, and I really respect people that are here tonight that have comments. But as you said, Peter, if we don't get it right the first time, it's a work in progress. And if we have to tweak it here, tweak it there, I think we have the ability to do that. So thank you for your time.
Motion.
We need to vote.
Motion's on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Delayed for 2 weeks. 3 weeks. Okay, next item of business.
It's Rob's turn. Yeah.
Update on the master plan. Sustainable master plan.
good evening, Rob Houseman,
Hi,
Director of
Rob.
Planning. In your packet, you should have received a fairly recent email and attachments that Vicky put out. We are about to be inundated with chapter updates for our master plan with the goal of having the completed document before the advisory committee in January for final reviews and edits. The goal here, the long view is the master plan is the foundation of all land use regulations. The likelihood that the plan will be adopted before we could effectuate change for town meeting 2023 is fairly low, but we will try to grab some low-hanging fruit to address housing issues and downtown business related issues if we can. In the meantime, we are in the process of making an application to the New Hampshire Housing Opportunity Program grant to get assistance in writing zoning ordinance changes to facilitate these types of to ease the housing issues in Hanover. The likelihood that those grants will be funded, I think, is high, very high. Alex and I met with representative from the Hampshire Housing and Finance Authority on Friday, and we felt confident that we were moving in the right direction. So long and short is expectation that the master plan will be drawing to a close in the end of this fiscal year with regulatory changes, low hanging fruit for this town meeting, and a broader rewrite of the zoning ordinance for next town meeting. Questions?
I, for one, very much appreciate the update and the very inclusive and thorough, and take one step at a time.
I would encourage people, it's posted on the website, encourage people to look at the draft vision statement, which is a page and a half, and it's kind of the goal, the big vision for the town, and a lot of work has been spent on it. The consultant team and the committee has done a lot of kind of consolidation of a lot of the public engagement, the surveys, the workshops, and it would be great. So it's posted there so people can comment and provide feedback. So, and we figure we'll come back to it, and I speak as I serve on that committee, we'll come back to the vision statement kind of at the end of all the chapters too, because we see that this is kind of a dynamic document. So is that right? Or
Absolutely
okay.
correct. And Joanna and Nancy both are participating actively in the advisory committee process, and Nancy serves on the planning board, who will ultimately be the body that adopts the master plan. So you're well represented in the process.
Okay.
In addition, the public participation process is ongoing and has been very useful and important to get the word out and solicit public feedback. Bill, do you have a question?
On you have community profile and the chapters, and then you have these client delivered dates. You just explain what the process is and the expectation for who's attending these events?
So the client delivered dates are when we are getting the actual draft chapters. And if you look at the bottom of the email, you'll see the dates in which the advisory committee will meet to review those chapters.
All right, so that's the advisory committee meeting.
Yes.
Is that a public meeting?
All meetings are public. Anybody who wishes to participate or get notice of it can send us an email, and they'll get a copy of the agenda, the link to the website and everything else. We do it in a hybrid fashion so they can Zoom in, if you will, or attend in person. And we take written feedback at all times.
Thanks, just need to clarify for the public. What's the plan and how could they participate if they so choose?
And there will be an additional public participation outreach program that we'll do as we bring this project to a close.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else to add? No. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, but actually, of course, give me the table, or the floor, I guess. I have to say, I've worked on and written a number of master plans in my planning career, and I would say that this is probably, as a sustainability planning effort, it is probably the most comprehensive view of a community I've ever seen. And kudos to our staff as well as to our consultants who are helping out, because it's really looking at, not only traffic and land use patterns, but also health and wellness, education. I mean, it's a wide variety of topics to make sure that we're resilient and sustainable as a town and kind of walking the talk. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you, Joanna.
comprehensive this, the word that might came to mind.
Almost staggering.
Staggering. Okay, thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great night.
You too.
So let's go to business. Review the veterans credit application for property located at 51 Etna Road. What do we need on this one? Alice, you need a vote to accept Norm's recommendation?
To accept Norm's recommendation to deny the request, as it doesn't meet the state's criteria.
Right. This is an application for veterans benefit and the applicant did not meet the criteria of the state regulations, which that individuals are not served during specific periods that are required. So it's pretty, to me, it's straightforward. Okay, so do I hear a motion to
So second.
further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
I,
It passes. Fire department. Did you get a car to work on here? You want to tell us about this donation? As long as you're here.
Yeah, I didn't
How-
know
how that all
if
works?
you needed me to come up, Martin McMillan, Hanover Fire Chief. So I'm not sure what you have for this evening. I know we received several.
Donation of an automobile. By Suzanne McDowell.
What's that?
A donation of an automobile. For
For
your use.
Suzanne McDowell.
Oh, that's probably one we're gonna use for extrication?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's donated this car, so you can use it for. your exercise.
Auto extrication
training.
for practice.
right,
Mhm.
and
And-
since it's over the value of $25, we have to. vote
Correct.
To accept the
Are there
donation.
more that you have?
My understanding, this is, I mean, this is a fairly routine thing that comes in and then we do that and then it ends up getting scrapped.
Do
And
we set,
sometimes it's
do we
fair.
set the value or they claim a value, you know?
I would expect that they give us a value when they tell us that they want to donate it. but I
Yes,
imagine
and
it's a
then
little-
we have a towing company that comes and for removing it after we've torn it apart, they're able to scrap it and they take the scrap out.
So at this point, we're accepting the donation of this automobile.
Correct.
I move that we accept the donation of the automobile that is deemed worth more than $25 for the fire department to use in their
Extrication,
extrication
training.
training.
Your second,
I'll second.
further discussion? Thank you, Chief. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
It passes.
Can you send us some pictures when you do it?
Sure.
Approval of the minutes of September 12. I read them and they had no additions or corrections. Does anyone have any additions, corrections? First, let me move them. I move the minutes of September 12th.
I'll second that.
Seconds, any changes, additions, deletions?
No, I read through them. They seemed okay. It's. One modification is, I think that. In my comments in terms of select board reports, I think that it would be great if. They named the event because it was the Octum. Walk and stroll event.
Where are you, please, on page
It's on page 4.
4?
Is that what it's called? The Octum. Shake, it was some weird. Shake, rattle and stroll. Event.
Okay.
It's only because it was extremely, anyone who attended it, thought it was awesome. So-
That was the right.
And part of it had to do with the title. So.
Okay.
All in favor with that modification, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Alex, what have you been up to? What a report you sent us.
Yeah, I'll try not to,
Thanks.
what's that?
Just a few things.
Just a few things here. I'll try not to take too long here, but yeah, a couple kind of fun stuff. So let's see, on the HR and staffing side. I mentioned that I would be providing just the numbers of employees in and out each month. So this month we had 3 employees leave, one who we just recognized before, and 5 employees start. So I'd like to welcome Stephen, Bruce, Lauren, Melissa, and Judy to Hanover. I also mentioned in the report that there was going to be a kind of a Zoom meeting that I was hosting with 2 other town managers about hiring and recruitment issues. So we did have that meeting on Thursday. We had about 10 managers attend. I think we're going to have more the next meeting. At the end, the group kind of agreed to meet on a monthly basis and do like different topics each month. And so we kind of talked about a pretty broad range of things. I am writing up a sort of kind of like a blog post type thing from that with some of the issues that people were talking about, some of the ideas that we discussed. So I'll send that around if people want to read a little more about it. I think it's kind of exciting. I found a lot of really great other managers in New Hampshire and Vermont over the last couple months. So I'll say one interesting thing that is that I'll come back to a little bit later, which is that one of the things that we did touch on. So we talked about some of the reasons that people leave employment. And there was all sorts of different kind of reasons given. Obviously, people leaving jobs for greater compensation, people leaving for jobs with better benefits in the private sector. One of the things that came out was that a couple employees of towns that were on the call had left and had talked about in their exit interviews that they had been harassed online or in other ways by like members of the public. And that's why they were leaving their public job. And they said, I'm going to a private sector job. I don't have to worry about this. And so, you know, we've talked a lot about kind of civility in some of what I've been working on. And I just thought that was interesting that a handful of managers, and one of them, I won't say the town, but the person took a job trucking in and out of Boston. And of course I had to joke that that means that driving in Boston is preferable than
Getting abused. by
yeah,
people
which
online.
seems like a kind of a not a great thing. So I think all the conversations that we're having about just sort of how do we engage in kind of challenging conversations, you know, it's not just sort of an ethereal kind of abstract conversation. You know, I'm hearing from other managers in New Hampshire that people are leaving their jobs because they just don't want to deal with that anymore. So I think that's kind of interesting. But the overall framework of the conversation was, how do we work together on these issues as this keeps getting worse and worse, so that we're not just stealing employees from each other, you know, offering, well, we're going to offer more and more and more, but then we're just all moving the same number of people around, you know, shrinking number of people around the same number of towns. So shared services came up a lot. The next meeting that we're going to have next month is going to be specifically about creative benefits that people are trying in different towns, and pros and cons. And those conversations will kind of feed back to some of the work that we're doing with HR about the salary study. So that is next. And so we have begun working with Municipal Resources, Inc., MRI, and this is the salary or the class and comp study. And so we did send an update around to all employees in Hanover just, what's today, Monday, I think just the last week. Dave sent that around. And so over the next, we did select the 12 towns that we're going to be comparing to. And I can send you all that list. I don't have it in front of me. It includes some of the, you know, nothing surprising, I don't think.
It was in David's letter.
Yes, it was in David. Yes, so that's right. Sorry, his memo was attached to this as well. So there's more information in there if you'd like. But that is moving along. We're going to keep our employees updated as we move forward, and we'll keep all of you and the public updated as well. And you know, there's about 2 months ish left of that process. Any questions on anything there? Okay. Primary election and update. I did get some numbers from our town clerk that I didn't get quite in time for the report, but wanted to read them out here. So we had more than 50 volunteers who made the whole thing possible, that she wanted to make sure to mention. We had 2,348 people who voted, including absentee voters, out of 7,580 registered voters, so a 30% turnout. And Bobby mentioned that was about standard for primary elections in Hanover. We also had 256 people registered to vote at the election, which is great. When the polls, she wanted to make sure we mentioned that when the polls opened at 7 a.m., a lawyer from the New Hampshire Attorney General's office was there to inspect the polling venue, and we got a thumbs up, everything passed. I know that you were all there throughout the day as well.
We saluted him.
Yes, yes, I bet. And Bobby also wanted to make sure, so I want to just read this from her, is many people worked from before dawn to late into the evening to execute and complete the electoral process. The day went very smoothly. Thanks to you, our voters, and a huge thank you to the election staff and volunteers. You are all much appreciated for making an extremely complex process a good experience. On to November 8th. Of course, one election is over, the next one begins. So just wanted to provide that update for you all as well.
Great.
We discussed rental housing, so I won't go over that again. We just a housing update. So we are exploring, continuing to explore some of the options, especially what we've talked about in the past, which is can we find housing? Can we provide housing for municipal employees? Is that a way? I've gotten a lot of interest from other towns in this. It's something that a lot of employers are doing across the state. It is clearly a response to what we're all aware is not a great housing market. That individual, you're building housing in sort of different places because there's not enough at large. And so just wanted to mention that's a conversation that we're continuing on. That was something we also talked about with the gentleman Rob mentioned from the state. And so we're sort of just asking around state legislative delegation, our congressional delegation, the regional planning commissions, vital communities, all these different stakeholders, builders, developers, designers, architects, just kind of seeing what people think and some ideas. So that's it there. The next one is about the budget. So we are getting close. I don't think in my report, I said that we were going to be providing a memo on October 3rd. I think that will probably be in the next meeting or November 7th when we do the kickoff. We're just finalizing. We had a great meeting last week. I think we worked out some more details about the budget process. Tina and I are meeting on Wednesday to finalize some of that. I know, Kari, we've been in contact a little bit about that as well. And so we will have a sort of update in a couple of weeks about the budget process, which we expect to basically begin on November 7th of this year. So I'll have a little bit more about that in our next meeting. Let's see. I think I skipped something. Nope. Okay. So community and economic development. This has also been a really interesting kind of thread. I would say if this is a helpful kind of description of what I'm doing here. One, I think illustration is sort of the throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks. The other is kind of pulling threads and just kind of seeing what unravels. And that's one of my styles of sort of exploring these different issues, and have had some really interesting conversations over the last couple of weeks that have resulted in sort of an exploration with some business owners and some other stakeholders in town, and now some other towns like Claremont, and also some of the schools at Dartmouth like Thayer, thinking about things like like expanding sort of maker space and innovation and entrepreneur spaces in Hanover. Is that something that there's a community need for? There is a kind of DIY maker space at Thayer. I'm going to go up there and get a tour of that. I'm also going out to Claremont. They have a community maker space as well. And so basically what this allows people to do is do things like pay a membership fee, get certified to use equipment. Then you come into like a huge giant kind of space, and you have automotive equipment, and you have other machining and welding tools that sometimes are very expensive to buy for yourself, but you can go in and rent and use the equipment for an hour or 2 hours to work on a project for yourself. And the cool thing about it is not only does it give people the opportunity to work on projects they might not otherwise be able to afford to work on, but it creates a community space around working on those things. And what's super interesting is that when I spoke to the folks in Claremont about theirs, they said that by far the most frequently used spaces were textile and sewing spaces within the space, and that people would just come in and they connect with each other. People offer classes, and it's like a whole community that kind of comes together. And just thinking about, especially when it gets cold out, if you don't, want to ski, how many other things are there that we can do indoors? And so anyway, it just seems kind of a cool idea. We have lots of that kind of innovation mindset, you know, at Dartmouth, at the Howe, at our high school, and it just seems like there might be an opportunity to connect some dots there. So that was a conversation that was in part that's been spurred by a couple different people kind of suggesting things, and I think part of what my role is as town manager is to help kind of put people together who have ideas where there might be some alignment, just sort of see what happens. Next one, switching gears a little bit, is mental health resources and access. So this is obviously a huge challenge in our region and community right now, in the country. I have been talking with folks at West Central Behavioral Health and at Dartmouth as well. We're trying to think about some ways to support, especially the college community, but really everybody in the region, in trying to find ways to provide more preventative and sort of the proactive and reactive mental health resources. I know it's a challenge on the police and EMS side as well, that those are, it's kind of an increasingly frequent call type, and that the resources, you know, there's crisis response teams that they're not able to staff them because of hiring problems and housing shortages. And then that means that, you know, our ambulance is spending more time on a call that could theoretically go to a different resource. And the state is trying to roll out a program to help with this. So there's just a lot of pieces here, and just trying to help connect stakeholders in Hanover. We have a few ideas we're not quite ready to talk about yet, but just helping better connect people to resources, especially students and especially parents of kids in town. So if there is anybody who's watching or anybody on the board, obviously, who has, you know, any kind of thoughts or ideas there, please, you know, feel free to reach out as we try to figure out a little bit more that we can do there. A couple other things. A website update and a kind of an IT update. So just two things. One is that what we are just about ready to start doing, we're going to roll it out slowly. This sounds like a bit of a small thing, but it's a bit of a big lift to actually get it done, which is identification ID cards for all town employees. So that's something that is kind of a small detail, but is super important if there ever is an emergency and people need to get into town or get into the municipal building. Just making sure that every employee has an ID card. Most employees that interface with the public, I think everybody at fire does, everybody at police does, I think most of our building inspectors do, but this is going to be part of the onboarding that we do with new employees, is just making sure that it's easy with an official ID card to identify, you know, an official Hanover employee. The next is we are moving on the website project. So our IT director, Corey, and myself are kind of taking point on that. And we had a meeting with Civic Plus last week, and we looked at some other websites, picked out some different sort of basically what amounts to style and formatting guidance that will go into what's kind of called a wireframe, which is sort of an outline for the new site, and some colors and things like that. So pretty excited about that. There's a few things that at some point I'll need to ask for some help with, and one which I'll just throw out right now, which is anybody who knows anyone who's got great photography of Hanover things that we can incorporate into this. If people want to email me, I don't know if we have really a budget to license things, though that would be nice to do. But certainly if people are willing to share photos that they have taken of town events or, you know, historic buildings in town or beautiful sunsets, or I mean, anything like that, the website will have a lot of space for photos. So if anybody comes across or you happen to find anything, just send that my way. Or if you know any places where I can look or any photographers that I can reach out to, happy to do so. We kind of have stock photos at the time, but it would be really nice to have no stock photos and all really local stuff when we finish that. Next is on the sort of civics end of things. I have a kind of exciting update here that relates to the master plan process. And so I got a little bit of the next step confirmation actually today of a program that we are right now calling Civic Champions, but I don't know if that's going to be the name because it was just sort of a placeholder for now. And what we're intending on doing is basically plugging in high school students through an independent study program into helping us talk about our housing issues. And so as Rob was just mentioning before, the master plan will be finishing up around January. We're going to have some series of things to talk about in May at town meeting. What happens between those 2 dates? And what we thought might be really cool would be to help bring high school students in who are interested in learning about local government, and get them super up to speed on local housing issues and zoning. And then bring in a third-party organization and train them on how to kind of moderate community workshops and meetings. And then help them or empower them to host some conversations about some of the housing issues that we will likely be discussing in the spring. Some of those issues might be new issues that haven't been discussed at that level of detail in the community before. And what a great way to do that than having some of like our young leaders from our high school help guide those conversations. And so our goals are kind of threefold there. One is we want to have really, thoughtful and nuanced conversations about important housing issues. 2 is that we would like to provide young people in Hanover with an opportunity to learn and engage with the town. I certainly have always gotten this over the years. People say, I want to learn about politics. I'm going to go down to Washington, D.C. and intern for a senator. It's like, well, you might want to do that. Nothing against Washington, D.C. per se, but there's a whole lot of ways that you can get involved right where you live. And a lot of people don't know that. And so we're hoping to plug people right in there and give them an opportunity to learn about content and also learn about process. And as you all know, hosting and having community conversations is not easy to do. And that would be a really fun skill, I think, for the high school students to learn. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from stakeholders at the high school about that. And then the third learning goal there on our end is, well, how do we have hard conversations? In 2022, that does not seem to be a skill at the top of the list in the United States of America or in the state of New Hampshire. I think we might be a little ahead of the curve here in Hanover, but there's a lot of communities that struggle with this, and there's no reason to suspect that we might not struggle with it at some point. And so figuring out what works, how do we get people who may not agree about something to be able to talk to each other and work things out? Figuring out some best practices there would seem to be very valuable. So kind of, well, I wouldn't say kind of, I and the teacher at Hanover High School, Matt Prince, that I've been working on this with, we're both very excited about this and think the students hopefully will be super excited as well. And so the idea basically is that I'm probably going to go in and talk to them in November. We're going to get some students in. We're looking at maybe around 6, 7, 8 students, something in that general range. Then we will have some process of through the high schools kind of selecting the student leaders that would participate. They're going to get a download on housing issues and hopefully spend some time with Rob and kind of like learning. It would be great to have them in planning and zoning. It'd be great to have them at the fire department. It would be great to like plug them in that way. Maybe they can also learn about housing issues from developers and other stakeholders. Maybe they can meet with vital communities, et cetera. They get trained. Then we have a series of community meetings. Then hopefully they'll kind of come out to town meeting and kind of see what their conversations produce. And then we'll have a kind of debrief after that. And so it's a semester-long independent academic independent study. So they would get academic credit for this. So pretty excited about that. The other thing I'll say is that I think we had, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had a really wonderful meeting with the Dartmouth College Board of Trustees last week. I don't know if that was something that, Peter, you were going to, I don't want to jump. Okay. I just wanted to call it out. I think it was we were invited to come meet with the Board of Trustees when they were here at their quarterly meeting. And I'll certainly say my own experience of that was that there was a number of trustees that were super interested in kind of engaging with us and learning what issues were kind of on the top of our mind and how we can work more together. And I've already had conversations with the president's office about scheduling ongoing meetings with them. And so we're looking at hopefully maybe a quarterly schedule, something along those lines when the board is in town. It just seems like a really exciting step as far as the town and the college putting some formal mechanisms in place or more formal mechanisms in place to kind of work together. So I felt really good about that. And yeah, I mean, the chief of staff to the president, she followed up immediately to schedule the following meetings. And that was really great. And so I wanted to express my appreciation to Dartmouth College Board of Trustees, because I'm sure they're all watching the select board meetings. And just thank, all of you for participating, and Marty and Charlie as well, who are also there. And I just think that they have a new president coming in. And obviously I'm new here, and it sounds like there's a lot of potential synergies, and that's very exciting for our community.
Yes.
The only other thing I'll mention is, and I'm not going to spoil any details here, but in the Hanover Happenings podcast, which will be out at the end of this week, there is a new employee spotlight, which I think is going to be really interesting for a lot of people, especially anybody who likes doing things outdoors, which might be 3 or 4 people in Hanover. And so I would say, if you are curious about learning about a Hanover employee and hearing a little bit about the outdoors, check out the Hanover Happenings podcast later this week. One other thing I wanted to mention was just wanted to kind of give a kudos and a thumbs up to the fire department. I just went by and you had a kind of ceremony for hires and promotions that I know you weren't able to do for a few years because of COVID. And so just wanted to kind of give a kudos to the fire department. I love when you have all the families out, and it's such an important doing the formal parts of the process. I think we're all relatively informal here, but doing that is also really nice. And so I just wanted to thank you, Marty, for and Deputy Chief as well, for doing that. And I'm sure it meant a lot to the staff as well. And let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Yep. And that's it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Administrative reports, or select board reports, I guess. Kudos to Sunday for Touch a Truck event. I guess it was a big hit, and it's kind of cool to see Dart land at the race school parking lot, according to my 20-something daughter, because there were lots of families there, and she happened to be running by, and it's like, wow, pretty cool. So that's fire, emergency, police department was there. So that's another great celebration, really hopeful. That's exciting. And our bike walk committee is looking to have another, don't know what the new title of the event's going to be, but hoping to do something in October in the Dresden neighborhood to promote safe cycling for kids and families. So that's coming up, and more. Hopefully I'll have something next week, because we meet the first Monday of the month, so October 3rd. And I would concur that first time in my tenure that the Board of Trustees at Dartmouth invited the college, the select board, and town manager, fire chief, police chief to join them for lunch. It was very casual. Alex and Peter both spoke, which was great. Just, hey, thank you for having us. 4 tables, we were dispersed amongst the Board of Trustees. Dartmouth is quite large. It's like 26, I think, trustee members, and then senior leaders were there, and it was just a very, in my experience at the table, I sat with the police chief, and I think there were 6 trustees. It was very casual conversation about, what are the big issues that the police department faces, what happens, what is the select board? And it's almost like a civics class, like, just to be clear, as director of campus planning at Dartmouth and select board, they're like, well, how do you do that? And he said, there are lanes. And when I am at select board meetings, anything comes up with Dartmouth, I am not at the table. I recuse myself, and when I'm at work, I am at work. And then we went on to talk about the roles of the planning board, which is not, our role here is to guide our CEO or our town manager and to set our budget. And then the planning board reviews site plan review and subdivision, and our zoning board is our quasi judicial, and we are all separate. We're the different parts of our government. And so that was really, they were like, oh, okay. And so anyway, I think it was really worthwhile, that at least that was what we talked about at our table. very informal discussion. So that's all I have.
You know, the informal part of it was great, and I try to emphasize the value of the personal relationships that you can develop and how they come into play in terms of town-gown relationships. And so that at that meeting, there were 8 of us who shared a common graduate school. The trustee who is currently living in the town that I was brought up in. One person totally familiar with the Aloha Foundation, one resident of Hanover on the trustees. So all these personal connections get made at these kind of events, and they carry over into, you know, more substantive discussions at some point down the line, or a phone call that you can make when you need a substantive discussion.
Oh, I had one more thing.
Please.
Kudos to DPW. The roundabout at Reservoir Road
Oh.
and Lime Road was redone Sunday in the rain. And it was very nice and smooth. You didn't have to dodge the potholes, so kudos to DPW, and it was done during, you know, the busier times on the weekday. It was done on Sunday, so kudos to them.
Can you go out there tonight and go around it?
Yeah,
Just because.
That's because.
So just following on a theme before I tell you about my committee assignments, that my table chief was with me. And we spent time talking about housing and housing Dartmouth undergraduates, housing Dartmouth graduates, talking about the various sites around campus. And one member of the board of trustees said, "Oh, I didn't realize that they were still," this individual had graduated quite a while ago, "still housing students in that structure." And so I said, yes, and that is a structure, won't mention it, that I am very high on you folks looking at in terms of infill planning. So we had a conversation about, we started out talking about the 400 beds on Lime Road, right next to Chief's house, firehouse. And then really had a much more lengthy conversation about how Dartmouth's housing situation has an impact on the town residents. We've been talking about the rental ordinance tonight, and so I think it was an eye opener to there are few members of the board who live locally. Most of them do not. None of them at my table lived any closer than Washington, DC. And then further west, Chicago, San Francisco. So they were really struck by how in a 5,000 person town, another 5,000, 7,000 person college can really have an impact. So it was a great time. Time just flew by. We were all very engaged with one another. On my actual report, your planning board met on the 20th of this month. We spent all of our time talking about site plan regulations, which Rob referred to. Our next meeting is going to be on the 4th of October in a week. The How Board met on the 15th of September, and a lot of small issues, but the most important thing was being introduced to our new development coordinator, which is a position that's been vacant for about 7 or 8 months. So Ruby Simon is delighted that this new staff member is on board, and we're looking forward to her having more of an impact on our development issues. The How annual meeting, which is open to everyone. Food is always good. Conversation is very by the book, shall we say, because it just has to do with all of the kinds of plans that the How has accomplished and is going to accomplish. Is next month, 23rd October. It's a Sunday. You're all welcome to attend. End of report. Thank you.
Feel like a slacker here. Nothing to report.
My only report is that the Conservation Committee was not able to meet in September. We will be meeting in October, where we will again celebrate Jim Kennedy's long service on that commission. I believe there's no call for a non-public session. Is that correct?
don't think so.
Can I hear a motion for adjournment?
I motion we adjourn.
Second.
Bill, second? All in favor?
Aye,
We are adjourned. Thank you.
thanks, everyone.
Night.